Hello everyone, my name is Radhika and I'm the project manager for the COVID-19 guided build. This guided build is based off of a research project that I worked on this summer at USC in the ANRG lab called PyREM, the Python Respiratory Exchange Model. And my lab has published the code as an open source on GitHub for other engineers, students, and researchers to learn more and explore. And therefore I wanted to take an excerpt of that project and turn it into a 3-week guided build for students to learn more about the physics and math behind how COVID-19 is transmitted in the air and how we can use Python to simulate the trajectories of these droplets. This guided build was divided into 3 different sessions, and during the first session, we took a look at Professor Gavin Buxton's research paper, which is where this work is originally derived from, and we studied and discussed the 4 main components to this model, which are the projectile motion of the droplets, the evaporation and fluid dynamics, and finally the Gaussian puff model. This is a block diagram of PyREM that shows that given a time and an initial diameter and several decoupled function calls, we are able to predict the total exposure present in the air. And in this project and guided build, we primarily focused on the diameter, terminal velocity, and position, and worked with those and did a little bit of work with the concentration as well. The first task for members is to program the diameter polynomial in Python and create a function that returns the diameter given a time by the user. And some of the challenges with this function is that this diameter polynomial does not have real roots for all values of time. There's in fact a very small interval of time such that this equation even has real roots. So one of the complexities of this equation is that members had to figure out how to program the function to calculate the diameter using this equation such that t is less than t crit, which is also an equation given to them, and then use a fraction of the initial diameter for all other time values. The second task is to write a function for the terminal velocity in Python, and this is a little bit more complicated since this expression is an exponential and no longer a polynomial, so we can use the scientific Python library scipy.optimize and the function root in that library to calculate the roots to this nonlinear equation. And then using the velocity and diameter from the previous 2 tasks, we can write a function for the position. However, this is a little bit trickier since the terminal velocity is changing with time, and we can't just have a simple one-line equation. We have to take an integral of all the velocity values that are multiplied by time to find the z direction of the position. And then using those functions, we're able to simulate the trajectories of these droplets. After we discussed and talked about the equations and the physics and math behind many of these expressions and analytical equations, then members had the choice to plot a variety of different variables such as diameter, trajectories, and terminal velocity. And these are just samples of some of the plots that you can generate with the code. During the last session, we briefly looked at the exposure function and how we can use the Gaussian puff model presented in the paper to basically estimate the total exposure in the air at a given time, and then using that and multiplying it by the number of the breathing rate of a typical human to calculate the exposure after many breaths.
My favorite part about the COVID simulation guided build is that we looked at so many small details, very micro things like the diameter of cough droplets and how they evaporate in the air, and things you would have never thought of initially. And we worked out equations for those and put them together in a way that makes sense and produces a result that makes sense. And I also thought it was cool that we're working on something with so much relevance today, since this sort of scientific modeling of COVID being spread through the air is something that has been used by a scientific community or will be used in the future. And it was a great guided build. Thank you, Radhika.